On AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We mentioned a bit earlier in the week some of the comments from Jamie Dimon, of course, the CEO of J.P. Morgan, at the Reagan National Economic Forum, which is an answer to the WEF, first annual Reagan National Economic Forum. And after Dimon got through talking about some of the silly policies of the last administration, including but not limited to open borders, he had this to say about the biggest threat to America.
The biggest one, underlying both that, is the enemy within. I'm not as worried about China. China is a potential adversary. They're doing a lot of things well. They have a lot of problems. What I really worry about is us. Can we get our own act together, our own values, our own capability, our own management? What you heard today on stage was the amount of mismanagement is extraordinary, by state, by city, for pensions, and that stuff is going to kill us. And, I always get asked this question, are we going to be the reserve currency? And no. If we are not the preeminent military and the preeminent economy in 40 years, we will not be the reserve currency. That's a fact. Just read history. Now, I think we will be. Warren Buffett here would tell you we're enormously resilient. I agree with that. I think this time is different. This time we have to get our act together, and we have to do it very quickly.
We have to get our act together and do so quickly. Are we doing so? Brian Wesbury is chief economist at First Trust Portfolios. Brian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, great to be with you. Good morning, Amy.
Your response to Jamie Dimon's description of the threat from within, we have to get our act together very quickly. Does the big, beautiful bill advance the flag of getting our act together?
Well, first of all, I agree with him 100, 1,000, 1,000,000%. I don't know how to say that any stronger. The unfunded liabilities, if you just look at Illinois, technically the state and the city of Chicago are broke. And they have been for a long time. And we were able to hide it with all the COVID money. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars flowed to state and city governments. And they acted like they had their fiscal house in order while that was happening. And now it's over. And everything's gone right back to where it was before COVID. And we kidded ourselves. We fooled ourselves. If we look at Social Security and Medicare, Social Security in the early 2030s, it's going to have an automatic cut to Social Security. It's built into the program because revenues will not equal outlays. And every elected official and all their budget officials, they know these numbers. They're not hard to figure out. They're actuarially we can calculate them using actuary science. We know this, and yet they won't do anything. And that takes us to the big beautiful bill. What you keep hearing is it cuts $1.6 trillion out of spending over the next 10 years. And that sounds like a huge number, but we are right now we're on schedule to spend $87 trillion, the federal government is, over the next 10 years. So 1.6% of that is about 1.8%. So we can't even find the will to cut 2% out of the budget, and let alone 10 or 20, which is what we really need. Government is just too big, and that's why we're growing slow. That's why people can't afford houses and automobiles. It's because government is taking so much of what we produce.
So you understand Elon Musk's frustrations with it?
gosh, yeah, he called it a disgusting abomination. I mean, here's a guy who, figures out how to get rockets up and Starlink and put satellites up and saves people's lives and builds electric cars and the things. I mean, he's an amazing. He's he's a cross between Da Vinci and Einstein. And here he goes to government and tries to fix it, and he just runs into a bureaucratic brick wall. And by the way, this has happened before. Reagan hired W.R. Grace, who was a major financial figure at the time in the early 1980s, and he came up with massive changes to government that we could do that would have saved hundreds of billions of dollars, and none of them were put into place. And it's, in a sense, the same thing that Elon Musk has run into today. So he's frustrated. Like, why won't government cut spending? Why won't they fix these things that Jamie Dimon said perfectly are coming down the road? We know we have problems, and yet we won't fix them.
Well, I mean, no one is beyond reproach, and that includes Elon Musk. And Elon Musk is not averse to receiving government largesse and has actually defended government largesse in the form of green energy subsidies. So, everybody has their pet government program or government carve out, and this becomes the problem that it becomes like Illinois, which is it's sort of a microcosm of this problem at the federal level, which is becomes a cut me in or cut it out warlordocracy, and so you just keep conferring, you keep conferring benefits, and once a benefit is conferred, that it creates a constituency, and those who benefit from that constituency will never reduce the benefit to that constituency.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, great point. And I wasn't trying to ignore that and just praise Elon Musk for everything he's ever done in his life. He did accept subsidies, and however, in his attempt to cut spending at Doge, one of the things they did go after was all of the Green New Deal subsidies that were part of the. Remember, we called it the Inflation Reduction Act, and all we did was spend, and that's the real problem. The last 2 years, we had deficits as a share of our GDP of over 6.5%. These were bigger than even Ronald Reagan's deficit when he took over in the early 1980s. The difference was he had 10% unemployment to deal with. In the last 2 years, we were less than 4%. And so I would look at these last 2 years of government spending as being some of the most irresponsible budgets we've ever seen. And we're getting toward cutting spending, but not nearly enough. Right now we're on track to have permanent budget deficits of $1.5 to $2 trillion as far as the eye can see, and we're not willing to cut spending to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. But I think some people may believe that even if they're sympathetic to the point that you made, may believe we can grow our way out of it. And maybe Trump is one of them. You saw, I'm sure, the Atlanta Fed forecast for second quarter GDP growth now at 4.6%. So the AI revolution is going to finally increase worker productivity at more than a point or two a year. And you've got the tax relief going to unleash the entrepreneurial spirits of American industrialists, and we're going to grow. And if we grow and we improve the rate of increase in worker productivity, then we can grow our way out of this profligate spending. Do you agree?
Yeah, well, yes. In like a 30,000 foot view, remember when we're talking about, these are two different things. The 4.6% growth in the second quarter is different from the next 10 years of real GDP growth.
Yes, and right.
Over the last 20 years, the U.S. economy, in spite of smartphones and apps and the cloud and the web and AI and Starlink and electric car, in spite of all this stuff, in spite of the government massively increasing spending, in spite of the Fed holding rates at 0 for 9 years, we did all of that, all these new technologies, 0% interest rates, massive increase in government spending, and yet the economy only grew 2% a year.
Yeah.
If we want this deficit, these deficits to not hold us back, we need 3 to 4% growth. The question is, how do you get there? And my belief is the only way to do it is to cut the size of government. You know, Europe has grown 1 to 1.5% a year for 40 years. Is it because they're dumber than us? Is it because they can't figure out how to do anything? No, I would argue it's because their government's too big. Well, we have now reached the point where our government is as big, maybe even in some cases bigger, than Europe's. And that's why we're not growing fast enough. And then to come back to, you know, everybody's going to focus on this second quarter of this year, 4.5% growth or something like that. Remember, we declined 0.2 in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. So if you average both of those out, it's 2.2, 2.3% growth. And it's about the same as the last 20 years. And these two first quarters were highly impacted by front-running tariffs. In other words, we imported all this stuff in the first quarter to get away from the tariffs, to beat them. And now in the second quarter, imports are declining, and that's why the first quarter went down. The second quarter is going to go up. It's really the second half of the year that's going to show us what the trend is. And I think the trend is 2% or less right now. Government is holding us back. And that's the problem. If you had a federal, state, and local spending plus the cost of complying with government regulations, government takes 51% of everything we produce, everything, and either redistributes it or builds windmills or builds solar panels, whatever it does, it's taking 50%. No wonder we can't afford houses because it's taking half of everything we produce and so your house is a windmill in Iowa. That's what's going on.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I just saw data on the median age of first-time home buyers in America. In 1980, it was 28 years old. In 2024, median age of first-time home buyer, 38 years old.
Wow.
Yep, exactly. And, if you look at, one of the things that I've looked at over the years is the cost of a median home, all right, the average home price versus average income. And if you go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, it was 3 times income. Today it's 5, 6, 7 times income. Mm-hmm. And the reason is government's taking half of everything we produce. And so no wonder houses are unaffordable. It's not because BlackRock's buying them all or Airbnb, we're Airbnb and everything. It's not just because of local regulations. All those matter, but in reality, government just keeps taking more and more and more, a bigger share of everything we produce. And to me, it's pretty obvious. If you give up half of everything you produce, and government pushes it wherever it wants it to go, you can't afford a house or a car, and that's what's happening today.
Yeah, and meanwhile, our free market friend Javier Milei down in Argentina, I love bringing him into this discussion because not enough people do, because he's Hayekian on domestic policy as well as trade policy. He's a across-the-board free marketeer, and he has been materially reducing the size and scope and expense of the Argentinian government, and he has been unleashing the animal spirits of his economy. Argentina's economy reportedly grew 8% year over year in April. That's after growing almost 7% in January, 6% in February, and 5.5% in March. He's got inflation down. He's got the economy churning. He's reduced the the piano on the Argentinian economy's back, which is the government, and looky. It seems like we have that Argentina and Milei have a model that we could scale here in the United States.
Yeah, he is amazing, and he gave Elon Musk a chainsaw because he famously campaigned with one, talking about cutting red tape. But the problem, or the benefit, or the bonus that he has is that the judges of his country can't stop him, and he has the power to actually cut the bureaucracy and fire people. And we are getting stopped left and right by judges from San Francisco saying, no, you can't lay off these government workers. You can't riff them. Judges our bureaucracy is stifling us.
Yeah, judges in San Francisco, but let's be honest with ourselves too, as you were intimating, big spending Republicans in the House and Senate too.
Oh gosh. Yeah, there's plenty of blame to go around. Don't get me wrong, but President Trump only has a few tools that he can use. He can't really change the course of spending massively. That takes Congress. He can't change tax rates. That takes Congress. He can use tariffs. He can riff or reduction in force. Government bureaucracies, but even in the end, to really change that, he needs an act of Congress because he can't get rid of programs that they put in place. But he's doing it at the edges, and then these judges are stopping him from even doing it at the edges.
The Milei example.
This is why Elon Musk calls it abomination.
Yeah,
he's right. It is an abomination. We're frozen. We can't fix anything like Milei can.
Well, right, but my point is, for Milei, the example is not just for Trump; it's for the entire political class in D.C. I mean, it's the message. I'm not just sending the Milei message in Trump's direction. I'm saying in the direction of everybody in Washington, and frankly, maybe federal district court judges around the country too. But if you had Congress acting consistent with the power of the purse, then you would have federal district court judges that would be more hamstrung to intercede where legislative power is being wielded. So that's one point. I wanted to get to something else. One other point that I mentioned earlier in the show that I wanted to get your reaction to, just in terms of, does this really underscore this dangerous moment we're in that Jamie Dimon was talking about, you're describing? Chief economist at Apollo did an analysis, and he suggests that the U.S. government credit default swap spreads, which, of course, reflect the cost of protecting a loan against default, the credit default swap spreads for the United States government are trading at levels similar to Greece and Italy.
Yeah, the U.S. is not going. Yeah, the U.S. is not going to default on its debt. I mean, here's the problem. If we're first of all, that's crazy. I wouldn't pay that insurance rate ever for a Treasury bond today. I think it's way overpriced. That's insane. Because we can print money. And now the problem with that is that we end up with inflation. That's not default. That's inflation. So what we do is, if you buy one of our bonds, we pay you back, but we pay you back with dollars that are worth a lot less.
Right.
So the markets are doing some strange things. People are saying that American exceptionalism is over, that we're going to lose our reserve currency status. And Jamie Dimon is right that if we don't change course, maybe in 40 or 50 years, we do lose our reserve currency status. But as of right now, tell me what currency in the world could take over for the dollar. There's not one. Nobody has the rule of law. Nobody has a constitution like ours. Nobody has trustworthy financials like the United States does for both our corporations. I mean, I don't trust state and local government budgets, but we all know they're in trouble. But what I'm getting to is that the transparency of our financial system, the ability of law to protect private property rights, that's why the dollar, we're not the world's reserve currency for nothing. And and there's no other country in the world that's as large as us or even close that has the same transparency of law and order and financials that we do. And so there's nobody to take over for us. And so I don't think we're going to lose this. I don't think we're not going to default on our debt. We may inflate, but defaulting, I think, is like maybe Apollo is going to go short the Treasury bonds because they think we're going to default. I think that won't work.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I wanted to get your take on it. One more item. Larry Fink was on with Bloomberg talking about the future of financial assets, what that looks like, and he suggested that this is what it's going to be.
We believe the next step going forward will be the tokenization of financial assets. And that means every stock, every bond will have its own, basically, CUSIP. It'll be on one general ledger. Every investor, you and I, will have our own number, our own identification. We could rid ourselves of all issues around illicit activities about bonds and stocks and digital by having a tokenization. But the most importantly thing, we could customize strategies through tokenization that fits every individual. We would have instantaneous settlement. Think about all the costs of settling bonds and stock. But if you had a tokenization, everything would be immediate because it's just a line item. And so we believe this is a technological transformation for financial assets. If you want to talk about voting and voting choice and all the things, if we know every moment who is the owner of that stock and it's now time to vote, every individual who has ownership is identified and they can vote their own shares.
What say you, Brian?
Yeah, well, and what he's talking about, just so everybody realizes, maybe everybody's smarter than me, and I have read a ton about blockchain, and this all stems from blockchain technology, which is the basis of all our cryptocurrencies. It really started with Bitcoin. Well, probably started earlier, but what he's talking about is when everything is on a general ledger, which is what every trade of Bitcoin is recorded. And what we're doing is we're taking that blockchain technology and we're using it to digitize and healthcare records and titles for property and ownership of equities and bonds. And so he's right. I mean, we're going to move in that direction. I think it's going to take a long time. Mainly because the power, the electricity needed. I mean, you start thinking about that these Meta and Microsoft and Google, they want to buy nuclear power plants to power their AI gigafactories. And that's the kind of computerization that we would need to tokenize everything. And then just take one step further. If everything is on the computer like that, which a lot of our life is today, we're at risk for electricity failure or an attack by an EMP device,
Brian,
something like that. So
we're going to have to leave it.
It's a really interesting topic.
We're going to have to leave it there. Brian Wesbury, Chief Economist, First Trust Portfolio in Wheaton. Thanks as always, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line. It is now 8 a.m. WIND Chicago.
The debate is big, but maybe not beautiful. I'm Dave Anthony, Fox News. Over that massive budget bill, Senator